Alrighty, guys. It feels like ever since The Office ended its run in 2013, fans have been clamoring for that Office reunion or Office reboot or whatever Office thing. You know, Steve Carell did SNL. He hosted SNL a little bit ago, and one of the jokes during his opening monologue was a lot of the Office cast members asking him about the Office reboot or reunion. Which has been, again, it's just been a topic of conversation. But the creator of The Office and a lot of the writers of The Office have gone on to make a lot of wonderful shows that are not in the Office universe necessarily, but still in the same vein, like The Good Place from Mike Schur, and of course Parks and Rec. So, you know, we've gotten a lot of amazing comedy sitcoms over the last 10 or so years. But Greg Daniels, who co-created the US version of The Office, because the UK version of The Office was created by Ricky Gervais and Stephen Merchant. But Greg Daniels, who is the creator, like we said, about the US Office, has now pivoted to a show that is set in the Office universe and is sort of a pseudo sequel, as we'll see in the trailer, but mostly a spin-off of The Office called The Paper. And we now have our first trailer for the show. The show is debuting on Peacock on September 17th, and looks to be trying to be the next cultural phenomenon in terms of sitcoms. And so now we have a trailer to react to. And look, whenever you're making a show in the same universe, sort of a sequel to The Office, you know, in that same vein, there's pressure. There's always pressure. And there was pressure, you know, people have talked about it in interviews, right? The cast and the crew of The Office have talked about it in interviews that there was so much pressure for them when they were even thinking about doing an American version of The Office all the way back when in 2003, 4, 5, when that show was debuting. Because people thought, oh, what a disaster. You know, the UK Office was so revered, even though at the time it didn't have super high viewership, but it had such a cult following that people loved the show and they said, oh, no way can you make a US version of The Office. And it turns out the US version of The Office has become one of the biggest sitcoms and one of the biggest shows ever in television history. And so The Paper, though, will have its expectations. And I have to say, as somebody who really enjoys The Office, though it's not a show like Friends for me where I can just put on an episode at any time and rewatch it. It's been a long time, admittedly, since I've actually seen a full episode of The Office. I watched it through twice, I believe, pretty early on during the pandemic, and I really enjoyed it for what it was. But you know, I think it's a show that is of its time, right? Definitely the character of Michael Scott is of his time in the early 2000s when I don't know if you can make a show exactly like the US Office today. That being said, so that was one of the things that I was looking most for in this trailer of, is this going to be, you know, are we going to have a very Michael Scott-like character? We knew that Domhnall Gleeson, who, if you guys remember from the Star Wars universe, plays Hux, and he does a lot of other amazing performances as well. But he was going to be the lead of this show, and looks like, you know, he was going to be sort of the not necessarily the Michael Scott in terms of personality, but in terms of the role size. And so that was one of my biggest questions heading into this trailer: are they just going to make him basically be the buffoon, make him be a Michael Scott kind of boss? Because I think there's a way to do that, right? There's a way to do that, but there's also a way to do that where it feels cheap. And it feels like a knockoff, feels like a ripoff, and it also feels insensitive because, again, I just think that if you do a character like Michael Scott today, it has to be different. It just has to be different. So I watched the trailer to see what they were going to do. And I have to say, I was pretty charmed. Because one of the things that they did with this trailer is create the same vibe, create the same setting, and of course bring in some familiar faces with Oscar returning to the show. And who knows, right? Maybe other Office cameos will be there as well. So we'll have to see about that, which I like. You know, I think it's fun, but I don't know that. I hope the show doesn't rely on those per se. But I thought that was fun, and I really, again, when you watch the trailer for the show for The Paper, you immediately are taken back to The Office. Same camera setup, same sort of vibe, same sort of setting and the way that the shots are set up, but also in a new time, right? You see people with headphones on and they're working at their computers. Obviously, when the US Office debuted, people were on older desktop computers, and so it's just different, right? But I think it's still very familiar. But one of the things I was really excited about was that the tenor of the show is different. It's not the buffoon Office manager that, you know, everyone likes and hates and loves to hate and whatnot, and you know, it's not like they're doing a one-to-one comparison with Michael and Dwight and Jim, but rather and Pam and Aaron and all those characters, but rather they're having Domhnall Gleeson's lead character. The premise of the show seems like more of a ragtag group of underdogs of let's get this right, and he's dealing with some characters who seem like they're less than enthused and have less than the ideal amount of experience you'd want for a paper. And he's trying to really, really make something good out of it. And I think that having that kind of juxtaposition and having that kind of banter. Also the jokes were pretty funny to me, honestly. And I think The Office is pretty funny, but it's not in the same way that I think some of the older sitcoms were, like Friends, for example, for me. But I thought some of the jokes here in the trailer were pretty funny. So honestly, for a trailer, it did what it had to in terms of, at least for me, as somebody who wasn't on the fence. I was going to watch the show, and I wasn't going to be one of those people who was going to say, I hate this show even before it comes out because it's desecrating the memory of The Office, one of my favorite shows. Nothing like that for me. But, I had my doubts and my skepticism of can this really recapture it, or is it going to feel like a cheap spinoff, even though it's created by the same people? And I think that watching the trailer, it has all the makings of something that could be pretty good. So we'll have to see. But I'm pretty encouraged by this first trailer for The Paper. Guys, have you seen this trailer for The Paper, the spinoff / sequel to The Office, set in the same universe? And what did you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below.